evening. Before we start, what I want to do is this. I want to see everyone's beautiful face. Everyone. Katrina, Iris, everyone. And I want you to do the following for me. All right? I want you to take this really, really deep, deep breath in. Ready? That's it. Take it all the way in. That's it, baby. Okay, release it. Do you know why we took that breath in? I don't know about you, but you know what I just smelled? I just smelled success. And that is why we are going to have this wonderful, wonderful creative writing workshop for scintillating speeches that will be provided by two world-class Toastmasters in Darlene Davies. One second here. And Rowena Romero. I wanted to make sure I pronounced her name correctly. To tell you a little bit about these two wonderful individuals, Darlene Davies is a published author, speaker, and mentor, a strong believer in lifelong learning. Darlene challenges herself to trying one thing each year. This year, she's writing a book on humor for speakers. Darlene says competing in contests has helped her to grow as a speaker. She has placed in all 4 district contests and is a past District 42 International Speech Champion and World Semifinalist. A Toastmaster since 1998, Darlene is a recipient of the District 42 Citation Award. Award. Next, we have Rowena Romero. Rowena started public speaking at the age of 5, delivering speeches at Filipino wedding receptions. She entered her first speech contest at the age of 9 and has been addicted to competing ever since. This coming May will mark 30 years since Rowena joined Toastmasters. 30 years. That's almost as old as I am. To date, Rowena is one of the 6 Toastmasters and the only female from District 42 to have competed at the World Finals of the International Speech Contest. Here are some of the other trivial things about Rowena if you need details that are less Toastmastery. She has performed in 2 live theater musical productions with front row center players and 1 stage play with Lunchbox Theater, is employed as a paralegal and operations coordinator in the field of forensic engineering. Ooh. She loves penguins, so does my daughter, especially the Emperor and King variety, karaoke, ethnic dining, and port. She's an avid hockey fan, and she's short and proud of it. I want to emphasize that again. She's short and proud of it. We have 2 world-class professionals here, Toastmaster professionals, and without further ado, I would hand off the baton to Darlene to start this wonderful, wonderful workshop.
Thank you, Vince, for that really warm welcome. And my goodness, Rowena, I'm still impressed by all your qualifications. I'm really happy to have her as my partner today. We'll start off by talking about the workshop objectives and the process we're going to go through so that everyone's familiar with it. Our objective is to help you tap into that creativity that's right here inside of you already, so that you can write a scintillating speech that is truly memorable. And if you haven't looked it up in the dictionary, scintillating means sparkling or brilliant. Our workshop is going to cover cultivate your speech creativity, captivating stories and meaningful messages, and the power of change to make it relevant to the audience. And I don't know if Marvin has put the handout into the chat yet, but if you would, Marvin, that would be very helpful. That way you can take the handout and download it and print it off and use it after the workshop. We are going to be following a similar track to it, but we will not be following it right away, so you don't have to worry about it. If any of you don't get that handout, then yell at Marvin. The process that we're going to use today is to please ask you to please remain muted while someone else is talking. You can leave your videos on. That will be fine. We'd love to see your smiling faces. And do use the chat for questions and comments, because we have an excellent chat master who is going to be vigilantly looking at the chat to see if there's any questions or comments that we need to address in the question and answer period later on. And use the reaction button. If you haven't found it yet, it's called Reactions at the bottom of your screen on the right-hand side. And use a reaction button to give us and any brave volunteers that do volunteer, give them your reaction so that you can have immediate feedback. And from time to time, we may ask some of you to share your writing. Please write in the chat or raise your hand if you want to say it directly. And when we're asking you to write in the chat to give feedback during my session, Rowena will be watching it and bringing forward anything that looks like maybe it should be said out loud so everybody can hear it. If you prefer to give your writing in person, just raise your hand and I will call upon you. Tonight, we are focusing on the creative writing of speeches. We are not focusing on delivery. That's a topic for another day. But we can tell you this, delivery will come naturally if you have the proper speech structure and if it's written authentically from your heart and your own personal stories. There are so many ways to write a speech. There's no magic formula. I'm sorry. Speeches can be for contests, for work, or for a community. And we are happy to share what has worked for us and you can feel free to use whatever will work for you. If you can take away 1 or 2 gems from today, I'll be happy about that. If you take on more, that's wonderful. Your next speech could be the best speech you have ever written. Please use your reaction button. Are you ready to start? Yay. Some people have thumbs. That's okay. That's a reaction. Vince, aren't you ready to start? Good job. Okay. So have anybody got questions about the process? Nope. Okay. So the cultivate your speech creativity. What are we going to do in this? I'm going to talk about where do you get speech ideas. I'm going to talk about relevance, how you invite an audience into your stories, and how you can use descriptive language. Rowena is going to talk about creating wonderful personal stories and meaningful messages. Because what we often find that speakers do not have a meaningful message or a change in their speech. So we're going to make sure that we cover all of those things. Rowena will also talk about where she gets speech ideas, and I'll talk about where I get mine. You may notice that there's a robot behind Rowena in her picture. See that? If you're familiar with Star Wars, that's R2-D2. Has anybody figured this out yet? Rowena, Romero, Darlene, Davies, R2-D2. And we call ourselves that all the time. She's the one that's going to be able to inhabit that robot. I'm not going to be able to, but I can operate it. Okay, so where do I get speech ideas? Well, I'm a little bit creative about speech ideas because they just come to me, but sometimes they don't. So I take a piece of paper and I write a list without editing as fast as I can. What am I passionate about? What do I know about? What inspires me? And I write and write and write. Give myself about 5 minutes to do that. And then I reread the list afterwards and circle anything that just kind of feels like that could be a good speech topic. The other thing I do is I'm older. I tend to tell stories over and over again, and people get a laugh out of them or they're interested in them. If you find yourself telling stories over and over again, write them down. This could be something that's meaningful to somebody else. And if I hear an idea that could be a good speech, and my family is getting used to saying, oh, mom, oh, grandma, that could be a good speech, I write it down so that I'll have it for another time and remember it. So those are some suggestions I have. What have I used as speech ideas? I have talked about very simple things, nothing dramatic, nothing wonderful. I've never climbed Mount Everest. I've never murdered anybody. I've never had cancer. I don't even fight with my parents. So what I do is I talk about important things like my husband's black socks, the remote control that we fight over. I've talked about my trip to Las Vegas with my dad, and I've talked about my relationship with my mother-in-law, and you'll hear more about that later. I've even talked about storytelling. These are simple things that I'm passionate about, and I'm really happy to share with other people. But why do they work? They work because I have personal stories, because I have vivid descriptions and draw the audience in, and because there's a reason that I'm sharing it with you, the audience, something that you can care about. Relevance. We've talked about where do you get speech ideas. Now I'm going to talk about relevance. The world champion Mark Brown once said, "The speech is about you, but it's for them." And I think that's an important part of what some people miss when they're writing speeches, is they write about this exciting thing that they did, and they don't take a moment to think about, why would the audience care about that? Why would they want to hear about that? So you need to answer the question, what's in it for the audience? Right at the beginning when you're starting to write your speech. If I'm going to tell this wonderful story, why does the audience care? I read a fellow that was named Andrew Stanton, and he's the writer of Wall-E, Toy Story, and Finding Nemo. And he said, somehow make a promise at the beginning of your story that the story is going to lead somewhere and that it'll be worth their time. So make them care. How do you invite people in? Well, you can invite people in many ways. But to me, a speech should be a conversation between you and the audience. And if it isn't a conversation between you and the audience, then you're talking at them. And when you're talking at them, they don't care as much. The details that you give in your story help the audience to visualize what's happening. And when they start to ask themselves, what would I do in that situation? How would that work for me? Then you are connecting with the audience. There was a study done some time ago in which scientists took a look at what happens between a speaker and the audience. And they found out that when the speaker and the audience are thinking along the same lines, there's an actual neural connection. They actually start thinking the same way. And there's a real connection. And if any of you have ever done a speech in which the audience is right there with you, there's the adrenaline is flowing, not only in you, but in the audience. And they're just sitting there taking in everything you have to say. When that happens, you just feel like you're flying. And it's just a wonderful feeling. But it also is wonderful for the audience because they are receiving the gift that you are giving them. So how do you invite people in and how do you find out the details? I've seen people quite some time saying, well, I did this or I did that. And I'm saying, well, can you close your eyes and go back and visualize what was happening in that story? What was really happening? What were you thinking? What were you smelling? What were you hearing? What were you seeing? and then write all that down and put it down without editing it. And then you can edit it after you do that. But you'll find that you'll get a lot more depth into your story if you're able to do that. It's a really valuable tool to invite the audience in so they can see themselves in the story. Often we hear speakers say something like this: I took my dog for a walk. That could be anything. I went for a ride in my car, I took a dog for a walk. In business, I've seen people do this where they're not describing exactly what it is they have. So I remember one time I was having to mediate between the buying department and the managers. The managers were ordering a vehicle so that they could go from one side of the city to the other. And they were really upset because they figured, I asked for it, so I don't see why I'm not getting it. And the buyer says, I don't know enough details to be ordering. So I did some PowerPoint. I got a bicycle and a compact car and a Ferrari. And I said, managers, and I put it up and I said, managers, this Ferrari is what you were thinking of, right? And they're all smiling. And I said, and this is what you needed. And I showed them the compact car and they agreed. And I said, well, this is what you're going to get, a bicycle, because all you asked for was you asked for wheels to take you from one side of the city to the other. You didn't give any other details. And that's what happens with your audience. If you don't give them enough details, enough so that they can see themselves in the story, they are in a tangent that is not where you want them to go. You need to be leading them by the hand. You need to be leading them with your words and with your heart. We're going to do a little exercise right now. I'm going to show a screen in a minute, but first I want you to take just a few seconds to think about a dog. Just think about a dog. You're going to take this dog for a walk. Just think about, what does it look like? And I'll screen share if I have the power. I do. Aha. Okay, so for creative writing for scintillating speeches, you thought of a dog, and I'm going to ask you, was it this dog? Or was it this dog? If you don't describe the dog, somewhere the audience is in one of those places and not where you want them to be. Now I'm going to show you another slide, and this time I'm going to ask you to write something down, and Madam Timer, could you give us 1.5 minutes to do that? And in this one, I'm going to ask you to look at the picture and then write how it makes you feel. What sparks in your own writing, what's in your own life, what sparks your ideas? Anything that you like to think about. Now, 1.5 minutes, just write it down, and then when you're ready, put it into the chat. How could you relate this to your next speech? Okay, the time is up. And I don't see any, I see lots of things in the chat. So Rowena, would you like to be able to pick out some of them and read them out? Is there anybody who wants to read it out themselves? Anybody who wants to share it themselves?
Vince here.
Yeah. Yes,
Con-
Vince.
Confusion in the myths. It makes me think of the corporate world and the concept of change management.
Excellent. Thank you. Rowena?
There are some very descriptive ones here, like from Scott. This pastoral setting, early morning before my first cup of coffee, I look out the back door.
Oh,
And
there more?
yes, I found this one very interesting. David versus Goliath. That was from Russ. Iris wrote, as a child, I watched my aunt kill a chicken for Sunday dinner. So this is getting a little morbid there, but I have never forgotten that chicken running around the farmyard with its head chopped off.
So what's good about some of these is that they're showing feelings or they're having a really good description of
Yes.
what it is they're thinking about. Sometimes
I
they're
read-
relating it to something else, and that's very important in descriptive writing, to be able to relate the unfamiliar to the familiar, like Vince did. Go ahead, Rowena.
Sorry, the chat was moving on me, but
There's lots there.
yes, but there was one that I saw that just had a group of words, which I found interesting as well. Sorry, it just keeps moving on me. Oh, my apologies. Okay.
Andre had one. Andre, do you want to share yours? Unmute yourself and share it.
You talking about me?
Yes, of course.
Sorry, I wasn't on my video because I was busy with my kid. Yeah, I remember many years ago, I was working with an organization called Mercy Ships, and I was invited to speak in this small little church in the middle of the African bush. It was literally just a structure with pillars and a zinc roof on the top. And while I was busy speaking, there was a chicken right at my feet, busy scratching for food. So as I was speaking, this chicken was just dancing around my feet as I was speaking. So that's what I remember when I see the picture of the chicken.
Oh, very good. Rowena, do you want to give me one or two more?
Sorry, it keeps moving. Everybody's typing stuff in. Protect yourself from the attacking chickens. Always wear rubber boots. Run.
I have to say that when I saw that picture, I was reminded of going to Kauai, where they have all kinds of chickens and roosters wandering around wild. And it was just crazy. Like no matter where you went on the beach or beside your condo or anywhere, there were these chickens staring at you. Okay, I'm going to give you one more slide. And that was wonderful. By the way, you can save the chat so you can see all of these wonderful creative ideas for yourself. So at the end of the meeting, make sure you save the chat before you leave. Okay, this one. What does this make you think of, and how could you describe it so that the audience would understand what was happening in this picture? You write it in the chat. And Madam Timer, could you give us 1.5 minutes again? I think some of us are not able to see the timer. So Madam Timer, when it comes to red, could you tell us?
I will.
Thank you.
Time.
Thank you. I'll stop sharing. Lots of comments again. I want to tell you before we start reading these ones, my husband's not a Toastmaster and he's not a speaker. He doesn't write. I showed him this picture and somebody had told me before that it was a picture of grief. My husband looked at it and he said, that's a picture of undying love. Everybody has a different perception when they see something or hear something, and it's your job to use the words that will help the audience hear what you have to say. So Rowena, would you like to try again reading some of these chat comments?
Yes, one that really touched me. Let's see. Compassion only takes a few moments, but can last a lifetime.
Who is that?
Hey, what was that there? Who's someone take credit for that, because
Oh, it was Lynn. She's waving her
Hang on.
hand.
Yeah, that's me. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's my daughter.
Oh,
Okay. So-
Camille wrote 4 hands, 2 people, 1 touch. Compassion.
Oh, nice.
Loretta wrote, the 2 friends connect in silence, knowing that everything will be okay.
Very good. Very good.
Mary wrote, I felt 2 hands on mine, 1 over, 1 below. It was a warm and accepting gesture from my mom.
Oh, nice.
The warmth of your hands calm my anxiety. There's just very powerful words here.
While Rowena's reading, does anybody want to read theirs out loud? We'd love to hear it. I'm going to pick somebody if you don't. Iris.
I only use 2 words, comfort and connection.
All
I
right.
think that right now, those 2 words can mean a lot to every one of us. Comfort and connection, whether we see it on Zoom or we're able to talk or see somebody in person. What we need is comfort and connection.
You can see how sometimes these pictures can bring out emotions in you or thoughts in you that you can turn into a speech. Rowena.
Ned wrote, counseling, agreement, unity. I am with you.
Nice.
Those just strong words to the point.
Yes. And we have time for 1 or 2 more.
I just wanted to say that when I was leaving home, my mom was losing her memory and my sister was comforting me with the same hand. And that's what I remembered.
Brought back that memory.
Yes.
Excellent.
Yes.
Okay, Pele is going to make me cry. She wrote 2 hands, 2 hearts, 1 love to keep us together.
Oh, okay.
Pele. Oh.
Well, I'm going to share now some examples from my own writing, before and after stories. So some of you may know that I won this district competition in 2012 with a story called The Storyteller. And this is just one piece. I could have said, well, I did say at the beginning, the train came in. It's in 1945 in a Saskatchewan train station. And I did say the train came in. Then when I rewrote it, this is what I said, and watch for alliteration and for the power of words to create a mood. The train roared in with a big black belch of smoke, snorting and squealing in protest as it shuddered to a stop. You can see how you can write the mundane part, but when you come back to the editing, you can bring in alliteration, which is what the big back belch is, or you can bring in the feeling of motion and power. In using dialogue, this is a simple one. It was in the game The Train Station in 1945. And what I had said in the first part, hundreds of uniformed men poured into the train station, and the mother and little girl looked for her dad. The little girl didn't remember him. He had been gone since she was a baby. And afterwards, when I rewrote it, this is what was in my final speech. Hundreds of uniformed men jumped off the train, raced into the station, a tidal wave flooding the room with shouting and laughing and weeping. A tall man in a blue uniform came near. Is that my daddy? No, hun, that is not daddy. Soon. You can see it tells the same thing, but much more powerfully with dialogue and with showing what is happening rather than just telling. I'll want to share another one with you. It is from a speech that here it is. It's a speech that I won second place in at division. So you don't always win, right? But still, this speech had meaning, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. It was about my relationship with my mother-in-law, and this is the opening. At the airport in Calgary and on the flight, people kept smiling at us. They knew. We were newlyweds. Was it my blushing cheeks or our starry eyes, or the fact that we held hands for 4 hours? We felt the downward shift as our plane began its flight approach to Montreal. The pilot announced it was 35 degrees centigrade there with 100% humidity, a steaming, sweltering September day. Out the window, I had been watching as white clouds became boiling black, menacing towers. Lightning flashed. I gripped Alan's hand tighter, and the pilot announced, "Fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy ride." That was the day I met my mother-in-law. So those are some examples of what you can do with all of those things. In the Storyteller, we had lots of moments, but I remember that when I first wrote the Storyteller and did it at the club level, the feedback I got was, why would this matter? It's just a story. It doesn't have anything exciting in it. It's just a story about a girl and her dad, about a grandmother and a granddaughter, and about a mother and her daughter. Nothing really exciting in it. And yet, people told me when I was at the semifinals, strangers came up to me and said, I was crying when I heard that story. I was laughing so hard I almost wet my pants. So you can tell that it doesn't have to be about anything really wonderful. It has to be about things that you're passionate about and that you care about and that you can make come alive for the audience. The message in this story was, tell your personal stories to your children and to your family and let them know what is happening. The other part I was going to tell you about was the story about my mother-in-law. It's called A Bumpy Ride. It was partly funny and it was partly serious. And like I said, I came second in the division contest. I didn't go on. 6 years later, I was at a conference, a Toastmasters conference, and a lady came up to me and she looked at my badge and she said, "You're Darlene Davies." And I said, "Yes." She said, "I remember your speech. In fact," she said, "it changed my life because I had always thought that my relationship with my mother-in-law was a done deal. It was doomed forever. But after your story, in which my toxic relationship changed to friendship, after listening to your story, I decided to try again. And my mother and I are now friends." I think when you hear this, it doesn't have to be the world champion speech. It doesn't have to be something about something unusual. It can be about relationships, about love, about courage, about learning how to do something. As long as it's about change, that will help you, the audience members, to learn something. If you write a speech in which it comes from your heart, you will feel that same connection with the audience. And someone who needs to hear that speech will be sitting in that audience and they will go, "Aha, this is what I knew. I need to know. This is what I need to learn. This is how I need to change in order to make my world a better place." And you may not ever even know what happened, but I was fortunate that day to hear that lady come. So the other part of that speech is that this was a long time ago. And last year, one of the Toastmasters came up to me and they said, "What are you going to do? Are you going to compete?" And I said, "I don't have any ideas." And they said, "Why don't you do that mother-in-law speech? Because that was an important speech." So there you go. All you have to do is describe it well enough so people feel like they're there and they can really learn from it. We have time for one more of the people that wrote about the feeling one. Rowena, have you got another one that you could share? R2, wake up.
All right. There were some afterthought observations. Like Loretta said that she noticed that there were only 3 hands. And there was a humorous one that was submitted by Karen saying, "You're a nice guy, but..." So I like the twist on that because it's like most people were having that more serious point of view. And Karen threw in there's a twist that can be just as just as effective, because it's that kind of sneak attack surprise that will catch people.
And that's something that's really important, isn't it, Rowena, is that you surprise your audience sometimes by taking them in one direction and then leading them over to the other and surprising them.
So I was like quite happy to see that different point of view. So thank you, Karen, for bringing that up.
So you do have a story inside you. Creativity is right here. Practice it and work on it. Like they said, genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. And that storyteller speech of mine was rewritten many times before it became something that I was proud of. So I'm going to announce now that you have a 5-minute bio break. Come back, at 1 minute before that. So come back in 4 minutes. And then Rowena, who is our star tonight, I haven't told you yet, but she was my coach when I went to the semifinals. So you're going to learn a lot from her, and she will be taking on the next section. Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you very much, Darlene. Okay, let's go and have that bio break. Talk to you in a few minutes.
The 1-minute warning. It is
All
my
right.
pleasure to welcome back the wonderful Rowena Romero. Sorry, Vince, but I thought you were just going to sit there and watch what we do.
You know
But thank
something?
you.
That's what I should do. Just sit here and mind my own business. Please continue.
Oh, no.
No.
But if you're going to introduce Rowena, remember she's R2 of the D2. Please welcome Rowena.
Thank you, D2. It's been a while since I've done a presentation. I'm not used to sitting down, but you can't tell, like Darlene said, on Zoom. So right now I'm the same height as all of you. Earlier, Darlene mentioned that she talked about how she gets some of her speech ideas and said that I would be sharing mine as well. But very quickly, I always like to rely on stories, like Darlene mentioned, that I'm sharing with my friends. If we're just having dinner or having tea, talking on the phone, if there's a story that I am sharing with my friends or family about something that happened that day, or a quote that I've heard, or some song lyrics, I will not necessarily have a speech at that moment, but a cultivated idea is there, and I will keep record of my ideas. I used to write them down in a book, but now with computers, I just keep a document going of ideas, and things will eventually come to fruition in terms of how something develops. For example, in 2006, I won the district humorous speech contest. And the speech that I had actually started from a table topic that I was given at one of the clubs I was with. The table topic was, how would you get out of receiving a ticket from a police officer? And luckily I didn't have to make something up. I actually had a true story of how I got out of getting a ticket when I was driving in Saskatchewan. But that was only enough of a story to fill table topics. But there was such a good reaction from the audience that day from the speech that I was sharing from my table topic. I kept record of that. And then probably about 2 years later, I was back in Saskatchewan. And if you know Joan McCauley, she's a past district governor. We were driving along and we got to a check stop. And while we were waiting, I told her this story of how I had gotten out of a police ticket previously. And Joan was laughing so hard. She kept saying, you have to turn that into a speech. You have to turn that into a speech. But again, I only had a 2-minute table topic. Soon after that, another incident happened to me that involved driving. And I incorporated that with the table topic that I had. And the next thing I knew, I had this speech that won at club, area division, and then eventually district. And it was about myself. And some of you know the story of a naked man who was involved and getting out of a driving ticket. For those of you who don't know the story, maybe I've piqued your interest. What does driving tickets and a naked man have to do in common? So those are ideas that can cultivate together. One day, hopefully I can maybe practice the speech or deliver the speech to some of you so you can get an idea of how that worked. But just keeping track and knowing that you don't have a full speech right away is something that you can always go back on and develop, and your speeches may combine eventually with experiences that you have. So hopefully that will give you some ideas for speech topics. Now on to developing meaningful messages. One of the things that Darlene and I really want to emphasize is that you have to have a message that people will care about. There has to be a lesson or some sort of thought-provoking idea to change you. If you just hear a nice story, that's all it is, a nice story. But if there is some sort of message that you can take for the rest of your life and apply it to things that you have experienced or that you know that somebody else is experiencing, those are the types of messages that will really touch people and make your message more memorable. If you turn people off with your topic, like there's a reason why we try to avoid speaking about politics, for example. For every person who has an issue, let's say with Donald Trump, there will be someone who loves Donald Trump. Okay? And you can turn those people off. There are some people who, as soon as they hear about someone dying in a speech, death will just shut them right off. Not saying that you can't speak about death, but you can't harp on. You cannot continue to talk about death and be sad and somber through your whole speech. You make the point that yes, there is a death involved, but how did that person's death change you? What did you learn? Do not harp on the death. Make something positive. Talk about what lessons, what memories you have. And you really have to avoid preachiness. There are some of those speeches that the person comes out, they're all gung-ho, and yeah, they've got great messages, but those messages are, follow these 3 steps and you will have a wonderful life. That is not sincere. 3 steps for everyone to follow is not easy. It's not the same. The formula does not fit everyone's life. You can make suggestions, or this is how I did this. This is what my mother did to overcome that. There has to be some sort of message and lesson tied in, not an unrealistic goal that is not achievable. One of these claims I find, especially is in Toastmasters, are when speakers come out and they say, everyone here can be the world champion of public speaking in Toastmasters. I am more realistic and say that is not possible. For example, I see there are 42 participants on the Zoom call today, and there's probably more because there are some people who have doubled up. And realistically, there's only one champion every year. To have 42 people achieve world champion status out of our district is pretty impossible. First of all, we would all have to live long enough. And then you have to count all of the other people in the world who are competing for that. I know that sounds like I'm a downer, but the realistic phrasing would be more, everyone here has the potential to become the world champion. We cannot make the promise that everyone here will be and can. Even if we were all world-class speakers, somebody is going to beat out someone else at club, area, division, district, semis. It's going to happen along the way. So those are fine-tuned little things that people need to be aware of. I would rather hear something that's more realistic rather than, like what Darlene said, haven't climbed Mount Everest. As far as I know, I haven't killed anyone either. So Darlene and I are 2 for 2 on that. So those are things that you need to take into consideration when you are writing your message. When we talk about what's in it for me, how is that meaningful? To talk about a speech that I heard at Worlds one year. And the contestant was talking about the fact that she had twins, a son and a daughter. And she mentioned that, but then she only spoke about her daughter. And she talked about how her daughter helped her learn this and do that and move on every day. But as the speech went on, I was like, okay, that's great that your daughter does this for you. What is it doing for me? Like, what does your daughter's existence have to do for helping anyone else? And then everyone was wondering where her son was involved. Therefore, those are things that you need to bring in. Now, sorry, I'm a little confused because the timing light just turned red, but I thought I had until 8:15. So can you clarify that?
Sorry, is this the 10-minute segment?
Okay.
Sorry.
I just see it's red, so.
This is the 30-minute segment.
Oh, okay, sorry. We will
Okay.
fix that.
Thank you. So finding messages that are universal is very difficult. A lot of questions, or a question that I know Darlene and I get asked a lot is like, how do you come up with a message that will touch everyone, that will reach everyone? And that's nearly impossible because, like I said, there will be people who are turned off or just don't want to listen. So you have to go in with that goal of at least reaching the majority of the crowd. And if you have a universal message, that really helps to touch in different ways. In 2005, when I won the District International Speech Contest, my topic was a little unique. I had never heard anyone speak about it before, and I just lucked out. I completely lucked out with the topic. My speech was about regifting. And I shared a story about my goddaughter who has Down syndrome and how I brought her to this concert that I really didn't want to go to. Yes, there could be people who don't like kids, who don't like concerts, who don't care, but I relayed the message of what I learned and applied that on a universal level, saying that it doesn't have to be about concert tickets. It doesn't have to be about children with Down syndrome. There was an underlying message of how I learned to appreciate other things and other people's point of views. So when you take your message and can share what you've learned, I'm not just going to talk about how I changed. I want to talk about how I changed and now how that change can also apply to other people's lives. It's taking that step further because the messages aren't about you. They're about your audience. Your examples are about you, your own stories. But how will that apply to the audience? And that is a very hard line. Darlene and I wish that we could give you a formula to do that. We can't. That's something that you need to find on how you can connect with your audience by sharing your experience. And the best way to do that is to think about what can the message be for the audience to learn from what I have to share. Why should I care about it? Now, we have an exercise on how I want to show that how you can change a very basic story into something that's a little bit more powerful or connecting. And I'm hoping that Darlene can share the slides for me. Darlene, are you there? Okay, so this is something, just get it set up. There we go. Okay. So this is a very basic speech that I started working on, I think probably like at least 10, 12 years ago. The basics of the story, or the introduction anyway, was exactly how I have it there, that my son was being naughty. He was attempting to use eggs for juggling, and I was angry with him. Now, those 3 sentences, if I just threw them all together, is exactly what happened. But what I did to make it a little bit more engaging is this next part here. I have it's how it's more descriptive. Okay. When I say he knew he was in trouble, he was caught red-handed with no means of escape. That is placing another character into the speech. And at this point, still not saying who he was, but I had people's attention because they're like, okay, who's in trouble? Who is she talking about? Okay. That sets up a little bit of intrigue. And then the next part, worst of all, there was that screeching sound, not of alarms or sirens. Okay. Screeching sound adds more to just the fact that there was anger involved. And then we know about the use of full names when you're in trouble by your parents. And I went on to say, it was me, his mother, using his full name, Jaron Douglas Chambers. Eggs are not to be used for juggling. That set the whole scene for the anger part. And you can just hopefully see how setting that scene up with the other person involved, bringing in the imagery of screeching and sirens and how angry I was is that comparison of when you use someone's name. It's just a little bit more elaborate on how you can be descriptive. So from that opening, Darlene, if you can move to the next slide. I'm going to take a couple minutes for some of you to take a moment and how could you describe, what are you seeing in this scene? And what's the look on my son's face? And is there some sort of twist that you can add to throw in that little bit of variety? So let's take about a minute and a half here. We have left here. Karen, if you can time that, and people just kind of jot down some ideas and you can share them in the chat as well, and then we'll get some examples from people.
Do we have to stop the screen share for the chat to work?
Oh, I don't know.
No, that should be fine.
Okay, good.
Okay, so is there anyone who would like to share how they see what the scene looks like? Or any of those really, what the scene looks like, or how would you describe my son? Is there some sort of twist that we can add? Mona wrote fear of being in trouble, horrified, ready to bolt. Okay, everything's flying by here. So actually, I'm just gonna, if I see some names, I'm going to ask. So, Connect, do you want to share what you wrote? Or here. It's hard to read these too fast. Connect, can you share what you wrote, please? Or I don't know, are you muted?
No, I'm not muted now, but I'm just trying to see where I wrote something here. Where is it? If I can find it.
Okay, that's okay. I can get okay. Connect wrote, your son is in his bedroom hiding with eggs, learning to juggle. He was shocked to see mom. Now he was scared as hell, but pretending to be an innocent little boy. Okay. Yeah. Anyone else want to share? Sorry, the chat is just flying by too quickly here for me to. How about Jay from Igniters?
Oh yeah, there it is. Yeah. You read mine already. Yeah. Okay.
Or Nandini and Marvin, how about you? I don't know which one wrote that.
I did. Just let me see it for a second. Oh. There were shells on the table. Sorry, one sec. I can't find it.
There it is. I see you, Nandini.
Yeah,
I
why
can
don't you read
find
it, Canuck?
yours.
Why don't you read mine, Canuck? I can't
Okay.
see.
Okay. There were eggs everywhere, broken shells on the table, bright yellow yolk splattered on the floor, and a small boy looking with horror at his mom.
Thanks.
That's Nandini wrote.
Thanks, Canuck.
Thank you. Yeah, the chat thing is turning out to be a little bit more challenging than we anticipated.
Kevin wrote here, the scene is in the kitchen, the refrigerator door is open. The egg carton is on the counter. 3 eggs are about to meet their fate, either juggled or scrambled, and one angry mom is about to erupt. That is a nice.
It's as if all of you were there.
I know. We can picture it.
So on the screen now, thank you, Connect. On the screen now is basically just the paragraph that I wound up writing. And you see the puddle of yolks adds a little bit more of the scene. My guilt-ridden son with his wide and deep blue eye, deep blue brown eye. Why do I keep saying blue? Brown eyes. So just to describe him a little bit more, and you can see little kids with their eyes really big, like saucers, right? To just add that little bit of the scene. And then there's that twist. Mom, do you know you're cute when you're mad? So really setting up the scene and bringing your audience into where you are. What is your point of view? What did you see? Let them see that too. One of the best descriptions I ever heard was someone making popcorn, and they said, the aroma of the buttery popcorn wafting through the air. It wasn't just, I smelt the popcorn. Setting the scene with your descriptive words are ways to really connect, to bring the audience into that experience with you. And that's what your audience wants. They want to be able to experience what you were going through, not just to hear about it or eventually even read about it. They want to be there. So really set up that scene, talk about how that message, what you've learned from it and how you can bring that all together. Sorry, I'm just running on my time here. So I hope those are some pointers in terms of how you can really just think about your message. So again, bringing up the scene, making sure that you don't have topics that will turn people off. If it is one that you think we turn people off, don't harp on it. Make sure that you can bring in the relevance of the story. Don't make false promises. Make sure that it's something that is achievable and doable, realistic. And just have those messages that if it means something to you, it most likely can reach out to someone else. If you deliver a story that isn't your story, then that's what people aren't going to care about. Share what you learned and what you experienced. And with that, I think we will move on to our next session that Darlene and I will both do with the power of change.
And Rowena, so what does power of change mean?
Well, as you're throwing it back to me.
Yeah, you're the one starting this one.
Power of change is when you have that either like an aha moment or what happened to you that made things, I've lost my word, meaningful, into motivating you to do something different or to continue maybe even doing something that you thought was not relevant. And an example of that is Bob Gabenis, a Toastmaster who some of you may know. I competed against Bob in 2002. He had a message or a speech called the 45-cent lemon. Really, it was just about, that was how much a postage stamp cost at the time to write a letter. And that's all it was him taking the time to write letters at the cost of 45 cents. And I've remembered that. I've remembered that message because he had a speech, a story of how he changed, and writing a letter was all it took. And that made me appreciate more taking the time to think of others and to write letters. And to this date, that's one of the speeches that has really affected me through all these years. And it's a message that I remember. How about you, Darlene?
I think when I was talking about the mother-in-law story, one of the changes that happened in that story, because she just took a dislike to me right away. I was 19 and I was not very diplomatic, and she just took a dislike to me right away, and she had all kinds of emotional problems. And as the years progressed, I realized that she didn't understand her son at all. and she just was suspicious of everything he did. And when she came to live to Calgary, and she was living in an apartment in Calgary, Alan did everything for her. He took her for groceries. He helped her with the cleaning of the house. He did everything, I did too, but I mean, he was really trying to help her. And he kept saying, she kept saying, why is he doing that? Why is he doing that? And she got really sick, and we were playing cards one day, and we were having a lot of fun, and we were laughing. And Alan went out of the room, and she just looked at me and she said, he's a really good man, isn't he? And that change in her sparked a change in me, because I just looked at her and I started to cry, and I said, yes, he is a very good man. And she looked at me and she said, and we've become friends after all, haven't we? And I realized at that moment that with all the things we'd done, we had become friends at last. And she died the next day. For me, a change is really important. And as you see through the story, you can see the progress of the change, but that final change and how it changed my life was very important to me. Okay.
Something that I want to share about Darlene and how she really has affected people with change. I was so proud of her, of course, when she competed at the semis for the World Championship of Public Speaking in Orlando, Florida. And her speech was about the storyteller. It was amazing how during the contestant interviews, one of the contestants this should be a time about each contestant, the time for them to share in the glory and spotlight of being there. This contestant chose to talk about Darlene's speech, and he shared how important her message was about storytelling. He was so touched and moved by Darlene's speech that's what he talked about instead of himself. So if that is not an example of what changes and motivates people, I don't know what is. I was practically crying for Darlene. I was just amazed that someone would do that. And he was a complete stranger. In the district, when people know other people, there tends to be that connection. It's there already. Not saying that we know all of the Toastmasters in the district, but here was a fellow contestant from a completely different country, different club, and he was changed. He was moved by Darlene's message. And Darlene, I think that was beyond the fact that, unfortunately, Darlene didn't place in there, but that was definitely a place in my heart for showing an example of how people change.
I think also I had heard one of Rowena's speeches a long time ago, and in it she was talking about her divorce, but the way she talked about it, she had us laughing, and we somehow we found the humor in all of this craziness about getting a divorce and about all the things that happen. And do you want to talk about that just a little bit, Rowena, about how that change happened for you?
The speech is about the quote, a Buddhist quote that is, all life is sorrowful. And while that sounds really negative, my speech actually was about how you cannot avoid sad things happening in your life. There is no darkness, there's no light without darkness. There isn't fast without slow. And my favorite one was always, there are no tall people without short people. But when I first wrote that speech, my first husband and I, Doug, we were married, and I had used that quote. And then I talked about at the end how we had gotten that together and how that quote had bonded us together. But then years later, when I dusted off that speech to use again, that reality was not the same. We were indeed divorced, and I couldn't use the same ending, of course. And I just came out and said, we are now divorced. And I know it doesn't make a lot of sense in the whole context without hearing the entire speech. But what wound up happening is that when I said that, it actually turned out to be a twist in the story and kind of like a comical relief moment as well. And there were people that were just suddenly burst into laughter, and it turned out to be one of the funniest lines. And you're thinking at first, well, what's so funny about a divorce as a child? But it was reality, and it turned out to be one of the best lines in any of my speeches that ever happened. And David Brooks, who was the 1990 world champion of public speaking, heard me deliver that speech at my regional finals, which is now the semis. And he thought it was so brilliant. He told Darren LaCroix, who was technically known as one of the funniest Toastmaster world champions in that sense, because Darren has gone on to become a stand-up comedian as well. And we timed the laughter that I got from that one line, and it was for 18 seconds worth of laughter in my speech. And Darren LaCroix got very jealous. But I'm remembered for that line, but people learned a message too from there, a lesson. I wish you could all hear it if you haven't heard it before. So I might have to share that in another session as well.
So when we do the delivery workshop someday in the future.
But it was the speech that earned me first place at my regional finals, and that was essentially my ticket to the world stage in 2005. So I owe a lot to that line.
Good time for a reaction. When we talk about change, this is just a piece that's missing a lot in a lot of people's speeches. They do the speech about what happened and how nice it was, but they don't actually share how you changed and how it changed your life. And I think that's a really important thing. In the storyteller one, I actually, I was learning that not only can stories help you to remember things, but it can be a healing thing. And I didn't know that before. And I demonstrated in the story about how the stories can be healing for you and for the people around you. And that was my change. That was my change. And I realized that I needed to share the stories more. I couldn't be silent even when I was upset. I couldn't be silent. I had to tell the stories. So that was my change. I think that it has changed my life quite a while, because I've tried to make sure that I tell the stories to the kids. And now there's a whole new set of kids that haven't heard my stories, the great grandchildren. I get to tell the stories again, so this is good. It's a lot of fun. But I think this is the really important thing for you to remember, is that when you're telling your story, you've got a really good message, but prove to us, show us how that could change your life. And if I'm really relating to your story, I will see how it can change mine too. I think this is a point at which we can now say we are open to questions. I see a comment there from Loretta saying, great grandmother, wow, I've got 4 of them. Isn't that exciting? 4 great grandchildren. And of course, they are the most beautiful, most perfect grandchildren ever. Unbiased opinion. And that lovely lady that's my daughter, she's a grandma. Yes, so any questions, anything that we didn't cover that you'd like to hear, or anything that you want to know more about, please do put them in the chat. And Al, can you just help us with this and let us know what the questions are, because it's hard for us to monitor it.
Okay.
And if anyone who wants to raise their hand and ask a question, that's okay too. Mona just said, my husband, he's always part of my stories. Nothing is sacred. That is true. That is one thing I want to share with you, actually. And it's not a question, but it is a comment that Mona inspired me to say. And that is that when I tell stories about members of my family, and no one is sacred, I don't talk about them and their stuff. I talk about my reaction to it. I talk about how I reacted to it and how silly I was or how good I was or whatever. But I don't try to analyze what they are doing. So you're safe, Lynn.
I have a couple of questions here. Will there be assignments coming out of these presentations?
No assignments, but you do have that. I'm hoping, did that ever enter the chat, the document?
Yes, did.
Okay, so
Yep.
take that document away and take a look at it, print it off and take a look at it, because it will give you a really nice guide to writing your next speech. All of the things we talked about, all of the questions that we say you should be asking are in there. And if you want to know the names of the simile and the all of the other things that the techniques for using descriptions, they're in your project, Pathways project called Using Descriptive Language, and it's very well done. Someone said they came in late and they would like the document. Could you re-put it in the chat? Thanks.
There's another question here. How do you decide what to leave in and what to leave out?
Oh, that's a
You
good
need to
Rowena
find
question.
You need to find a good editor, someone you trust. Yes, you can write an amazing speech, but yeah, they tend to be too long. And what I have been able to utilize, and again, this is just my experience, is one of my coaches is my sister, because she knows me really well. And I actually wind up writing stories rather than speeches. And let's say I could write a 15-minute story. I send it to my sister and she just then chops out. She goes, this isn't important. You don't need to say this. You don't need to say that. Having an objective person to look at your message and decide what is relevant and what is not is extremely helpful. Because you may want to go on and on and on about something, but you need that objective eye or someone else's opinion of what is important.
I think, I'm sorry, I was going to just add on to that, Rowena. I think also the editor can tell you whether or not you're making your point, whether you're really being clear or not.
There's also that point of being overly descriptive.
Yes.
Yes, you need to set the scene, you need to bring people in and bring in words to paint that picture. But it can be overdone and people will feel like they're beaten over the head in terms of what is actually happening. Let the audience's imagination take some liberties in terms of what they're seeing and experiencing. Though it is very difficult to edit, but if your line leads nothing to what your message actually is, then that should be one of the first things to go.
There's another question here. How do you deliver a power of change moment in an informational type speech?
I can answer that from a business perspective.
Right.
When I was working, I was a business advisor and strategic planner. And one of the things I had to do was give speeches to managers and vice presidents and whatever to get them to participate in the strategic management process. And they did not want to do it. And so for me, it was a matter of sharing information in a way that they could see the value of participating in the strategic planning. And the stories that I told and the message that I gave them changed their opinion about whether or not they would participate. We actually got some very good responses from people because I told it in their terms. I didn't use all of the accounting words. I told it in their terms so that they could understand why this was important for them to do.
Darlene, could you repeat the line you said about proving to the audience how it changes your life?
Well, I think it's what we often do is we tell them, we say, I did this, this, and this happened to me. My guru told me this, and so therefore my life has changed. If you don't show them how it changed, if you don't show them how you feel about that change, then they won't believe you.
Okay.
Does that answer the question?
You have to believe in your message too. If you're not connecting your message, if you have over rehearsed your speech so many times that it's mechanical and it's almost like someone was just recording you and you can rewind and you do the same thing over and over again without that emotion and feeling and the sincerity, it will start to come through. And if you're not sincere, people won't connect to you because they're going to have that feeling of, why should I listen to you?
And here's a question from someone. How many coaches do you think a person should have during a speech run? And how do you listen to everyone's thoughts, suggestions, and comments?
How about if I answer that one first and then get the expert to answer it afterwards? Okay, so people can listen to a whole bunch of people. You practice your speech if you're trying to get to the district level. You practice your speech at a whole bunch of clubs and you get all kinds of feedback. And some of the feedback that I got when I was practicing was ranged from dump the whole speech, it's all rotten, to if you only change the beginning, the middle, and the end, it would work, to this is fabulous, I don't know what to say. And you don't know what to do with this information because it's so opposite. So what I do is I took along a friend who helped me to filter all of that information. And one of the things that I also found was that you have to consider the source. So is this the speaker like Rowena who's been to the World Championships and knows what she's talking about? Or is it something that they're asking you to do that you could never do in a million years because you're not capable of doing it? You have to figure out what will work for you and then you do it. And I only had one coach at a time, or I had a circle of gold. Hey, everybody, a circle of gold. I had a circle of gold of 4 people and we helped each other. So that's what I did. Now, Rowena, you know the answer, so I'll pass over to you.
Everyone will have a different style, but again, I feel you need to have a core team of people that you trust and people who know you. You can't go too big aside from if you're doing a circle of gold, but on a personal level, what has worked for me and what I highly recommend is you come up with a feedback form. Anything that you want to have the feedback on from your audience. What was my message? Tips for improvement. What did you really like? What was strong? Ask for the good and the not so good. But then the next step is I don't want you to read that feedback. Like Darlene said, you have someone who filters out that information for you. And when you might read from one person, you need to do this, or I didn't like how you did that. But if it was only one person and the point doesn't make sense, then that's when it's kind of irrelevant. but it can be to your advantage as well. Again, it was my sister who was filtering out my feedback forms. And there was a point that at first when she read it, she dismissed it. But then when it showed up multiple times, I think it showed up about 10 or 12 times on different feedbacks on different events, she realized, okay, maybe these people have a point. So then she discussed it with me, saying, hey, this has come up several times. Maybe we should consider this. So that's when it became relevant, when more than one person was actually making a valid point about it. And that was actually helpful because I was able to just tweak my speech a little bit. I didn't make a complete change. It was just needing a little tweak in terms of moving a couple of paragraphs around. And after I did that, it actually was helpful. So having a coach in that regard to filter stuff out for you and to read things is extremely beneficial. And then I had a different coach, Bob Huey, some of you know is an accredited speaker. Bob did not help me with my speech writing, but he helped me with my stage delivery. So having people who are strong in different aspects and regards are great to get the feedback from.
That's really good advice because I find that some people are excellent at giving you feedback on delivery, but not so much on writing, and vice versa. We have an expert on feedback in this room, and that's Nandini. Nandini, do you have something to offer to answer that question?
Both you and Rowena have covered a lot of really important points. I think that you have to trust yourself when you get feedback. And I think that it's important that you know what works for you. And I also think that, as you said, surrounding yourself with good friends or people who know what you're about and can be helpful, I think really makes a difference. But I also have to say that some of the best advice that I've gotten were from new evaluators who just said, I'm not sure, Nandini, but this is what I think. And so I want to say to everybody, whether you're new or experienced, you can offer gold nuggets, and I encourage you to offer it because you just don't know what will resonate with the speaker. Thanks, Darlene.
Thank you, Nandini. Nandini is the District 42 feedback team leader for Circle of Gold. So she has lots of experience in giving feedback. Yes, exactly. This is what we should be doing for everybody who's giving comments. We have an opportunity now to hear from you, to hear what it is that you will take away. And what is one thing, you can write it in the chat or you can raise your hand, but there's one thing that you're going to take away from this workshop that will actually help you to write a better speech. And we can start with Yvonne Harima. She's down in my bottom left corner here. So Yvonne, was there something that you took away that you will be taking away that will help you with your next speech? Nope.
Sorry, I do that quite often. I say, don't forget to involve the audience and don't forget to engage them in the speech, and don't just ramble your speech from start to end, but engage them. What would they do in that situation? And I think it's a very engaging way to get them occupied in your speech and listen to it.
Thank you, Yvonne. Yeah. And Chatmaster, did you want to read some of the things that people have said are nuggets?
Oh, let me gather them up here. I wasn't watching.
I see Lena said, what is in it for the audience? That is something she's going to take away. Same as Yvonne.
Yeah, power of change moment. Have a universal message. The takeaway, descriptive language, and sometimes fewer words are better than too many words. And the concept of making change a focal point in your speech, which is probably a key point, I think.
Be authentic. Came from Russ.
Yeah.
Lots of great ideas from there. People are going to be taking away quite a few things.
I like what Pele wrote about your speech should be a conversation between you and the audience. That was
Yeah,
a point that Darlene brought up earlier.
yeah. Engage the audience so that they experience what you've experienced. Our illustrious Toastmaster and published author, Vince, are you going to be taking away any gems?
Actually, believe it or not, that was the one you just read. It was fine. However, what I really like is what Russ said about being authentic and the power of change, because I speak a great deal about change in leadership. Yeah. Thank you for asking me.
Thank you. And Mona's been really quiet, so we should probably let her speak at once, at least. Mona.
I'm always quiet. What the heck do you mean I'm quiet? I think the key thing that I've learned, and I've written a lot of notes, of course, from you brilliant pair. And I think the thing that I've learned through this whole thing is to talk about what you have learned through the whole process, rather than telling the audience. And it's something too, like I work with families, as you all know, and I think that's key of what we learned. And I like that word, actually. I think it stuck out, and it came from both of you. It was synchronizing. So that's my quietest moment. There you go.
Okay, Alan, did you have time to check some of them out?
Engaging the audience, if you can give them goosebumps, so much the better. And make the audience feel like they're in your stories. Engage the audience. Have you changed? How have you changed because of what you were talking about? And I think that takes us back to where we were before.
Okay, there's a couple of people that are here that Mary, you're a brand new Toastmaster. Mary who? Do you have something that you're going to be taking away? Unmute yourself, yeah.
Yes, I have learned a lot from this workshop. First of all, I know how to connect with your audience, how to grab their attention, and a lot of when you writing your speech, I learned a lot of methods to make your speech more attractive and more engaged to the people. Thank you, Darlene.
Thank you, Mary. And Russ, then too, you were here and you're a past world finalist a couple of times. Did you learn anything to take away, help you be a better speaker?
You know what, I think both you and Rowena, thank you both very much. I thought you covered everything, a lot of great material tonight, and I'm really enjoying all of the questions that are coming into the room here. I think it's just given me some inspiration to try and get back to competing again, because it's been a few years. So thank you for that.
And did you learn that you should listen to your editor, Russ?
Yes, I am starting to work with Darlene on a speech idea, and I've sent her several speech ideas. So yeah, I'm continuously editing them, aren't I? Thank you.
Sorry, I couldn't resist. Al, Chatmaster, is there any last ones before we turn it over to our Toastmaster?
I think we've essentially covered everything that's in the chat.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I will turn it over now to Mr. Toastmaster himself, Vince.
Thank you very much, Darlene. Now, the one thing that I want to do is thank a few people. Laura Chambers, who organized this wonderful event, ended up getting both Darlene and Rowena to give this phenomenal workshop here at CATS. Unfortunately, she had a family emergency, so she wasn't able to attend. I would like to thank Loretta for opening up the meeting, Al Gibson for being a chat master, Karen Roberts, the timer, our tech guru, Marvin Henry, of course, our fabulous presenters in Darlene and Rowena, and of course, each and every one of you. Thank you for coming. And now I'm going to give a little poke here. I'm the VP of membership here at CATS, and I'm going to put my email in the chat here. Please feel free to take it. And if you're interested in having a conversation regarding joining CATS, by all means. There's some shameless promotion here, but from the bottom of my heart, thank you for coming to this wonderful event. And Darlene and Rowena, thank you kindly.
Salute to you. Salute.
Thank you.